Hey, Nick. Good to see you, at least virtually. So I'm going to start lecture number 1, and I'm going to sign. I don't know if you can hear anything, but I'm following lecture number 1 from American Musical Theater. Hi, everyone, and welcome to American Musical Theater. I am Dr. Luann Davis Haggerty, and I'm excited to begin this journey with you. Now, I'm going to be talking. I'm also going to be playing some songs and giving you some bits and pieces of musical theater as we go along. So you'll excuse me as I switch back and forth from talking to the computer. This lecture will be captioned, but I won't be able to sign it at the same time. If you'd like to have this lecture in American Sign Language, email me at lrdnpa@rit.edu, and I'll make sure it gets signed for you as well. So here we are. And through this online method, I'm hoping that we begin a conversation that you will continue long after this course is over, as we explore the sounds, the history, and the secrets of American musical theater. Now, I recommend that you think of these lectures kind of like episodic shows, like you would see in Netflix. And feel free to stop and start however you need to. So there's no need to just sit and listen for the entire 20 minutes as if this were a face-to-face class. I wish it were, and I hope that we'll have that again. But for now, let's use this medium in the best way we can, which is take your time, stop and start. You can listen, you can come with me for the space of time that's comfortable for you. Start and stop as you need to. You can take notes, maybe even write down the music mentioned or the musical, the composers or stars. I may mention something that sparks you in particular. Go ahead and empower yourself to dig deeper. There's always more to know and more to find out. These lectures will be captioned, and if you would like them in ASL, do email me and I'll arrange for that to happen. Let us start. Let me see. We start with how many different people from different cultures came to the United States. And many of them went through the big city ports. Makes sense. Many came to New York City. So in New York City, we ended up having a wide variety of cultures. And those cultural influences are really what makes the American Broadway musical develop, grow, and start. So to start our history, let me talk about the dream, the glamour, and the reason that this one street, this one place, could become a cultural crossroads for an entire nation. How does it still remain the goal or the brass ring for so many theater people? So many of us still want to go and make it on Broadway. What causes that draw? Was it all the lights? Was it, I don't know. Could it be just Broadway itself? The lullaby of Broadway. Broadway is life. It's glamorous. It's dazzling. We're all playing dress up. Let us tell you a story to make you feel better. Ask an actor and you'll get a different answer for the passion and the love that Broadway holds in our hearts. The optimistic dreams of a nation gave rise to a uniquely American art form, the American Broadway musical. It's like a bar mitzvah. It's a wedding. It's a glorious invention. It's innocent optimism. And it's an economic engine. Possibility. Everybody wants to go. Everyone on Broadway is a star. Broadway is the outgrowth of every immigrant, I believe. It really reflects the patchwork quilt diversity of America. You're going out there and nobody, but you're coming back a star. As Sondheim wrote, something's coming. Something good. If you can wait. You never know how it's going to happen. But something magical can always happen on Broadway. Broadway is the street of dreams. And over the last 100 years, people have come here from every corner of the globe hoping to make their dreams come true. I was one of those dreamers. I made that journey here to New York City. I made my living here as an actor for nearly 20 years. And still a small part of me lives here in Greenwich Village at the IRT Theater on Christopher Street. You can look that up online too. But let me take you back uptown to 42nd Street. The lights of Broadway have always been irresistible. And every night in the theaters around Times Square, conductors raise their batons and the lights dim and the curtain rises on a world of theatrical magic. Broadway is like that power of the music of the night. So while the Broadway musical has entertained audiences for over a century, the history is what I want to focus on right now. There's been over a century behind entertainments. It provides a fascinating window into the culture of America. I mean, think of all of the different songs you already know, whether you're a theater person or not. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Welcome, bienvenue, welcome on cabaret, in cabaret, in cabaret. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in the life? How about love? We could go on, and I could spin through all the musicals that any musical theater kid quotes in one day as they're having a conversation. The theaters themselves have mostly stayed the same. Musicals have always reflected the changing times, whether offering an escape from a world wearied by depression and war, or celebrating life with a fresh, upbeat optimism. The Broadway musical has sung the promise of America. Life can be bright in America if you can fight in America. Life is alright in America if you're all white in America. The musical has produced a hit parade parade of unforgettable songs. I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night, and still have begged for more. New stars, delighted with wit and humor. It's good to be the king of Broadway. And throughout its history, Broadway audiences have traveled to the spectacle of it all. They traveled to the circle of life. A century ago, the American musical took shape in the home of the Lion King. It was at the New Amsterdam Theater. Now, you have to picture this. It was very different then. Upstairs was a rooftop supper club. Back when the New Amsterdam was the showplace, the legendary producer, Lorenz Ziegfeld. Ziegfeld was the first great impresario. He was, he started the American Musical Theater. Let's put it right there. He was a producer, yes, but he was also a visionary. So let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Little joke from Sound of Music for those who didn't get it. The musical has always been a unique mix of high art and low, music, comedy, business, show. In its earliest days, one production, above all, brought together a variety of theater traditions combining song, dance, and comedy in one extravaganza, the Ziegfeld Follies. We still hear these great stories about his shows and how perfect they were, and how chic they were, how stylized and beautiful, how artistic they were. The curtain would rise on the Ziegfeld Follies. First and foremost, you would see spectacular settings, the like of which you've never seen before, shimmering with color and light. And then we bring out the ladies of the ensemble. These were gorgeous, grandiose, fabulous productions. They were huge production numbers of hundreds of girls sometimes. They were the favorite part of Ziegfeld's creation of the show. He also had novelty acts, he had sketches, there were the tableaux vivants, but there were the gorgeous girls. And they were vaguely underdressed, but the whole thing was strangely innocent, even in all of its glamour, and very, very American. Ziegfeld made a myth of the American extravaganza. It was abundance. It was an abundance of talent. It was an abundance of design. It just irradiated off of the stage. The curtains, everything was absolutely the best that money could buy. And that's what he sold. The joy of Ziegfeld is he was almost his own best creation. Florenz Ziegfeld, impresario extraordinaire. That's all his business card said. People already knew who he was. He was a 26-year-old first generation American named Florenz Ziegfeld. Florenz Ziegfeld Jr. came to Broadway looking to secure an act for the Chicago World's Fair. When Ziegfeld arrived in New York that spring, there were no theaters north of 42nd Street. Longacre Square, Broadway, and 42nd Street was nobody's idea of the crossroads of a nation. At the edge of the Tenderloin area of stables and brothels, that area was then notorious for horseplay. There was was plenty for Ziegfeld to see. He could see much of it a little bit further downtown. Downtown, you'd run into black-faced minstrels. We'll get to that. There's a lot unpacking to do with that particular part of the American musical history. There were knockabout comedy acts from vaudeville. There were lots of European-style operettas with beautiful maidens and heroic princes. There was variety. The least expensive shows were on the Lower East Side, where all sorts of boisterous routines amused the hard-working immigrants on that Lower East Side. The audiences are, from that era, the ethnic minorities who have moved into New York City. And so one way to appeal to these minorities is to have comic sketches and songs that caricature stereotypes. There were Italian jokes, Irish jokes, Jewish jokes. But by being made fun of on stage, they were being included in America. So, in a way, they started to take those jokes and own them, change them so that they didn't have the sting of how they might have been intended, they might have been thrown. Florenz Ziegfeld ultimately hired a performer from Broadway, from the Casino Theater on 39th Street, appearing in Adontis. His name was Eugene Sandow. Couldn't sing or dance, but boy, could he attract a crowd. Ziegfeld made his first mark with not a woman, not a glamorous showgirl, but a weightlifter, a bodybuilder, and a gorgeous, physiqued man named Sandow, who virtually took the fair by storm. He wore as little as possible to keep the censor out the door. But newspaper articles of the day said women were just passing out by touching his muscles. Ziegfeld had a healthy understanding that sex sells, and it did play an important part in everything he did. In 1907, Florenz Ziegfeld found the formula that would make him Broadway's greatest showman, simply called The Follies. Ziegfeld's review took the French Fallait Bergère and made it American, with song, dance, and comedy sketches. The Ziegfeld Follies really were an amalgamation of everything that was happening in America, in New York at that time. This was an age where all these different ethnic communities were coming together, different kinds of music, ethnic, comedy routines, and he would wed it all together. Here's a song of the Folies Bergère. Now that's a 1940s song, and you're hearing Fred Astaire sing it. A little later on, we get in the musical 9, we get this song. This is Judi Dench. Costumes, dancing, a moment of life. Flo Ziegfeld was like the Broadway equivalent of the melting pot itself. He had all ideas churning in him all the time. He was always thinking of something new to do, some new talent to find. And just like the Folies Bergère, it had to do an awful lot with beautiful women. He had a way of finding the women in the Folies Bergère, in the Follies, the Ziegfeld Follies. And his touch had to do with beauty. The thing that he was most interested in was glorifying the American girl. Who is that? That's everyone. All of the immigrants are all over New York. You walk out the door, you hear, oh, the Italian organ grinder. You have other people are singing and dancing. They're from all over. You have Dutch clog dancers. You have such a wide variety of every country, every culture representing itself in some way, shape, or form. So how do you distill that down into the American woman? What is the American woman? Well, from his point of view, it is reported that he felt the eye should be large and expressive, and he would pick a girl that you would think was pretty, a regular profile, decided asset, but by the time she got on stage, she was suddenly beautiful. Her figure was perfect, and if it was not, the costume made it seem so. The show girls were exquisite. They came from all over the country. Now, they were all about 6 feet tall. Did you know that the Rockettes, even today, have to be at least 5'7"? So they were very tall. They were very attractive. They're fabulous. They had to be able to carry these beautiful costumes, huge headdresses. They had to learn a certain walk in order to balance the hats. The hats were huge, and their arms were often outstretched. They called that the Ziegfeld walk. They had to be able to display those costumes. These women were considered gorgeous, and they were objects of desire. I've heard stories of how even a chorus girl in her day never opened flowers from a stage door Johnny unless there were jewels in them. Of course, now we look back, and with our brighter cultural and wider perspective, it looks exploited to us. And in fact, sexually, it was a dangerous and an exploitive profession and time. But Ziegfeld really did show something special. He really wanted to celebrate women's beauty, talent, and skills. And you can't really argue with the amount of work he provided. Bottom line, he provided work for women, first of all, on stage where we were not allowed to be for centuries. And in a world where it was tough to get a competitive paying job, especially as a single woman, jobs tended to go to men, since in a culture of that era, it was expected that any man who came in was probably providing for an entire family. And so they would hire a man at a higher salary, and more often than they would hire a woman. And a single woman, they were always worried, might leave if she married, if she got pregnant. And so that's where we start the inequality of equal pay. Not for Ziegfeld, though. Some of the highest paid people in his shows were those showgirls, and there were hundreds of them. Ziegfeld's genius was mixing the whole, until he was able to produce a complete work of art. No one ever knew how he accomplished it because it was such a wide mix. Where did he find the people? Where did he find the time to get out of his office and go and find these people? Some of these girls and women, they started at 14, 15, 16. We didn't have the labor laws back then that we do now. You have to think of, well, let me give you an example. My sister-in-law was a New York City Rockette, and that was back in the 50s. And the opportunities that gave her, the glamour, the skills, the dance skills, the fine precision needed, and the money, that was all very life-changing for them. My sister-in-law was making more in 1 week as a Rockette than her father did in a month working as a railroad supervisor. I mean, imagine making more money than your parents at 17 or 18 years old. It was absolutely breathtaking. Pretty girl is just like a pretty jewel. A very well-paid pretty jewel, too. There were women who lived for the rest of their lives on that Ziegfeld money. When the city fathers renamed Longacre Square in honor of the newspaper, the New York Times, that's when we get Times Square. Times Square became the heart of New York. And then when the subway station opened there 6 months later, bringing in visitors from all over the city, the subway made the Broadway musical available to a wide audience, which quickly became enamored of a very particular performer, a wisecracking but patriotic Irish-American. His name was George M. Cohan. Let me give you a little bit of George. Now, most people know George M. Cohan from the movie, and the movie was Jimmy Cagney. The person you're hearing now is George M. Cohan. Check it out. You can look that up. You know this song now, don't you?
Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there.
George M. Cohan, with his energy, was the most incredible performer to get on a stage. Now, I'm not just saying that for nothing. I actually had a friend, yes, I'm old enough to have had a friend, who saw him in person. At that point, he must have been 60 years old. He was in a show called I'd Rather Be Right. And even then, he was amazing. All George M. Cohan ever wanted to do from practically the minute he was born was to be on stage. They brought him out for a bow when he was like maybe 1 or 2 years old, and I think that's all he ever really cared about or knew. From all of the biographies I have read or pieces that I've seen, the interviews I've seen about George M. Cohan, he was the song and dance man. He was a brilliant song and dance man. He came out of vaudeville. Now, vaudeville, you gotta know this if you're gonna know American musical theater, because vaudeville, V-A-U-D-E-V-I-L-L-E, was an essential training ground for the Broadway musicals. Vaudeville was very much the individual performer in the individual act. You came on, you did your song, your juggling act, your dog act, your tap dancing on ice skates, whatever your act was. But it focused on that act, on the individual performer. Some of these people would spend their whole lives developing 12 minutes of perfect material. Vaudeville shows were America's most popular entertainment at the beginning of the century. Prices were cheap, but the variety of the acts was enormous. In fact, I feel now with Google and Facebook and Zoom, with all of the new technology that we have now, performers are again turning inward. They're going, a TikTok video could take a person 8 hours to perfect, but they're going to work at it, they're going to get it right and refined, right down to that 30-second blip they can put up on TikTok. And that is exactly how a vaudeville performer would have felt. They would try out the material, see how the audience reacted, and if they consistently got good response, they'd keep going in that direction. Now, in the ideal vaudeville program, they would want to have complete satisfaction for everyone. I don't know that anything can ever offer you that, but for everyone present, so no matter how mixed the audience may be, wherever they are, whatever state, there were vaudeville houses, maybe 20, 30 in every town, in every state and city, in every kind of town in our democratic country. There would be an opportunity for everybody, a chance for all to be able to get out and express their talent and refine it and play with it. Now, some of the theaters are segregated, of course, for this era and this time and this culture, but the theaters were there and the opportunities were there. Now, for George M. Cohan, he had a mom and a dad. They were an Irish husband and wife vaudeville team called Jerry and Nellie Cohan, and they gave birth to their son, George M., in 1878, though not on July 4th, as he would always claim. Born on the 4th of July. No. Cohan never attended school, but he toured the country in his family act, and even with top billing, Cohan wanted more than the vaudeville stage could offer, and in 1907 he made it on Broadway with a show called Little Johnny Jones, where he served as its writer, its composer, and its star. Anybody who's in theater will tell you it is not wise to direct yourself or write for yourself